what's going on, that narrative in your mind that's become normal to you that you have a blind spot to.
Yeah, and you have to put the inner critic out of business by deconstructing what the inner critic's platform is. Its platform is your trauma. Its platform is your attachment style. Its platform is your family of origins behavior that you inherited, your belief systems that I mentioned earlier, you don't know you have. These layers are where the inner critic finds its voice from. You can't just do la 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 to the inner critic. It doesn't work. You can't shout over it. You have to disempower it gradually by removing from it its power.
Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Health with Holland podcast. This conversation with Paul Scanlon really reminded me we can't neglect our thinking if we want any kind of real lasting change and not actually getting stuck and going back to old habits. Paul is a speaker and mentor who's been teaching self-awareness and authenticity for over 45 years. And we go into an area that's, I think, really neglected. It's why women can't seem to make change, why they keep going back to old habits. And he shows us that the answer isn't like a stricter plan or another routine. It's figuring out the beliefs and labels we've been carrying since we were young. The whole conversation made me realise how much we try to skim past this when we really need to address our thoughts and beliefs if we want to make real change. Hope you enjoy. Paul is someone who has deeply influenced the way so many people think about leadership, emotional intelligence, and what it means to live as your authentic self. Paul Scanlon has over 30 years' experience helping people grow, not just professionally, but personally and emotionally. After 3 decades leading in the not-for-profit world, he transitioned into teaching, mentoring, and speaking on some of the most important skills we need today: communication, personal growth, emotional resilience, and leadership from within. He's the author of multiple books, a keynote speaker around the world, and host of the hugely popular podcast, Growing Big People. But what I love most about Paul is his ability to take really big, sometimes messy-like topics and make them very simple and human. In a world that's constantly telling us to hustle, perform, fit in, Paul's work reminds us that the real power is in unlearning and slowing down and coming home to ourselves. And that's really where I want to start. A lot of what you do really resonates with me because it looks at the core part of why people find it really difficult to move forward into a more content life because of the rush and because of that inner critic inside. So I really just want to start with saying I love how you talk about how we carry labels that were put on us when we were younger, like the good girl, achiever, lazy, and how do these labels quietly shape our lives without us even realising, and how we can peel them off. And that's where I'd love to start, really.
Well, labels are for packages, not for people, is one of the mantras I like, because I think that sort of brings it down to the issue with the whole labeling thing. If we're sending something to someone's house, it needs a label done. But we do that with humans, and we've done it for generations. It still continues, especially in the Western world. So my point with that comment, Rebecca, is that we are hijacked from before we're born with labels, because you're born white or black. You have no involvement in that. You're born, Irish or American or Australian. You're born into nationality. You're born into skin color. You're born into your gender. You're born into your politics. You're born into your religion. You're born into a socio-economic state. So you're born labeled, as it were. They're all labels. Mm-hmm. And then after you're born, nurture goes nuts. Then the caregivers in our lives goes nuts with labels. Then you're smart or you're stupid, you're good at this or you're bad at that, like you mentioned a few things earlier. That starts going nuts then. And then on top of that, culture starts labeling crazy. So your culture where you're born into says that people from this culture are more emotionally reserved. You're not American, you are Japanese. So you dial it down to fit that culture, as opposed to being born in America, where you might be more confident, more extrovert, more loud, as it were. Cultural things to do with your personality and how you should be in that culture also then starts to label us. And then when you micro it, the town you're born in, you'll know this from Ireland and the small town mentalities in Ireland, same in the north of England here where I live. Then you're dialing into the Irish small town mentality that if you don't break free from, you live and die in the same town as generations have. Mm-hmm. So I think, and then the family culture. So all of these layers of voices, influences that get busy labeling us, that are shaping fundamental foundational directions in your life. So what I call belief systems, psychologists call belief systems, are established by the age of 8. Yeah. These belief systems are established through all of these layers of nurture and nature and culture that are telling us this is who you are. Mm-hmm. So before you're 8, whether you grow up to be, stingy or generous is decided for you. Whether you as an adult are a risk taker or a play it safe person is decided in your first 10 years. Mm-hmm. Your attachment style is decided in your first 10 years. whether you are a forgiving person or a grudge-holding person in conflict, is decided in your first 10 years with no reference to you. So now you're not 8, you're 38, but you're still struggling with things that you don't know where they came from.
Yeah.
It's that.
That's mind-blowing to think of that, because, and even now, there's so many extra influences on telling you how you should behave, in terms of now you have the extra layer of social media. So you're identifying with a lot of people you think you should be like. So It's like that added layer of pressure to be the false self, to please others, rather than to be the authentic self. And I think now more than ever, people are in need of the authentic self, and how to actually foster that, because people have forgotten. They're just trying to always mold and fit in. So that's incredible to actually hear that and know a lot of you was formed by the age of 7 or 8. And for people,
I didn't know that till I did research, and it made sense to me then, because when I looked at my own life, I think, why am I defaulting to behaviors or habits or reactions or emotional states or energetic choices? I don't know why the hell I'm doing that. There was no rhyme or reason to so much of my behavior until I realized you didn't choose this. It was chosen for you in your childhood. And unless you wake up to realize my life is being governed by autopilot settings that I didn't choose, unless you take your life off autopilot and flight manual, which is exhausting at first, and that's why people don't bother. That's why people, as we know, go to the gym in January and they quit by February. And you know, metaphorically, that's for lots of things in our lives. It's because, and it doesn't sustain itself, because you can't have a behavior change without a belief change.
Yeah, you've just hit on such a monumentally important point, when you see people all the time now, and I think this is huge, living on autopilot, because obviously they're very regularly overwhelmed and busy all the time, and addicted to that element of being busy and rushing. But people can't change without addressing, as you said, the labels they have. Behavior change won't come until you can have the stillness and the ability to actually be self-aware. Most people don't have the self-awareness that subconsciously you're operating off a label. And I think that a lot of people don't do that messy work. They'd rather do a program that tells them, do 10,000 steps a day, eat this food, boom, boom, boom. But they're not addressing the core thing, that's never going to be long-term change without you changing the label. So really understanding that deeper, messier work is such an advantage in the long run. I just think that's incredible to think of, because I think a lot of people are searching for the quick, but if you don't have deep self-awareness and you're not continuously trying to achieve who your authentic self is, but a lot of people are not doing that. It's not even on the radar.
No, it's not. And of course, what we don't know is that we are all being handled, managed, governed by the ego. And the job of the ego is to keep us all safe. So even though it's not who you are, that identity is not who you are, those labels are not who you are, the ego's job is to keep all of that intact. So when I encourage people, and I know you do too, like you just did, to attempt living from a different part of themselves. So for instance, have a day where you try to be more intuitive and more flow state and more spontaneous and go with it, especially if you're an overthinker. Experiment with that. The moment you decide to lean into intuition, your ego ramps up its volume and says, whoa, what the hell? No. We don't do this. This is not good. See, this didn't end well last time. Yeah. It won't end well this time. And it brings evidence to bear to convince you not to be intuitive. But unless you start being more intuitive, you can't create a road less traveled towards your authentic self.
Yeah.
And the ego is threatened by the intuition, because the ego is fueled by certainty and safety and routines and systems and labels. The intuition is fueled by curiosity and wonder and awe and adventure. So when you start paying attention to the intuition, the ego gets really threatened, because it knows if you keep being intuitive in your life, the ego's voice gets dialed down.
Yes. And there's a huge part of that the more dysregulated you are, the easier it is for your ego to hijack all your behaviors.
Right.
Most of us are obviously living in quite a dysregulated realm. Yeah. And it's very hard to be intuitive. Like, that gut instinct. The majority of people, if you ask them what brings you into flow state, what allows you to listen to your gut instinct, they totally disconnect. And you nailed it there when you said it's the ego running the show. But how do you placate and say to the ego, it's okay, I can actually do more intuitively? And I think that's where a lot of people need to place a bit of focus.
Yes, because intuition operates in the body. Intuition is a feeling, it's not a thought. And if you are not, and this has been my issue all my life with my abuse in childhood, with my violent alcoholic father, I didn't live in my body, because I researched, obviously, when I wrote a book called I Am Not My Father, to write about my background, and to all those out there struggling, millions are, is that I realized when you are in a violent scenario as a child, you escape into your head and become hypervigilant. Where's the next fist coming from,
Yeah.
So you're not in your body. So it's been difficult for me to access my intuition, because I've not lived in my body all my life, most of my life. I've lived in my head because I feel safer, more in control. But the ego loves that. The ego wants you in your head.
Yeah.
So I have reinforced my egoic voice all of my life unknowingly by not listening to what my body was feeling. So I was never comfortable with dance, or with music, or with food, or with intimacy, or with energetic awareness, or with massage. I just wasn't in my body.
Yeah.
So the ego loves that, because it doesn't have to fight me then sensing intuition, feeling it in my body, feeling it in my energetic space, and realizing, wow, I have this overwhelming feeling to say this or to do more of that. And that felt really good. I'm going to do more of that. I didn't have that going on for me like a lot of people do.
Yeah.
So for me, I had to battle strongly against the ego to realize, you are keeping me out of my body because you are scared of me experiencing things intuitively that are going to put the ego out of a job.
Wow. And I think a lot of people are living in that. They're just constantly overthinking and running the pro and con list through their head.
Right.
It's funny, I did that for so long. It's only in the last few years I'm doing the work to be able to be more intuitive. And it's amazing to think, if you actually just drop into the body, and it's a skill obviously over time to learn to listen more, you have such an easy ability to make the right decision, versus you could do for months to-do lists and pros and cons, and you come to a decision that's maybe not in alignment with your values. But just dropping into yourself, and I think for the person that's listening that can resonate with exactly what you said, most of your life you lived in your head. What was the step that brought you to thinking, okay, I possibly can live more intuitively? And I assume it was just a host of lots of things you did at once. But how did that look?
I think one of the things was, I noticed intuitive people were having more fun than me.
Yeah.
I envied people who just leapt off the cliff into the plunge pool below, as it were, rather than what I would do. I would go to the edge, think it through, do a risk calculation, because the ego's telling me, no, this is not going to go well. Whatever metaphorically that might be, in terms of creating a new friendship, or stepping into an opportunity that I think is too big for me, or saying something that I think might be too disruptive, or getting a man bun. Seriously, I colored my hair for most of my life. I'm 68 now. I colored my hair, and there's a point where men coloring hair looks like it. So I thought, you know what, just give in to the gray. So I did about 10 years ago. I let and then I let my hair grow long. I've never had long hair, never had a beard, never had gray hair. So about 10 years ago, I decided to just let it go gray. I grew it a bit longer, and then one day, and I started not shaving, and then one day, randomly, I just tied my hair up into some version of a man bun. Never done it before, and then waited for the comments from my family. And in they came. Oh, what the hell? Looks like Miami Vice, or like a drug dealer, or a homeless person, or whatever, all this. And I realized that it was teasing stroke discomfort. They were uncomfortable with the possibility that I would keep this look.
Mm-hmm.
And that's their ego appealing to my ego to behave yourself, go back to what you were, don't rock the boat. Mm-hmm. So for our viewers and listeners, Rebecca, I want to say to all of them, listen, it's as simple as that. It's as simple as you wear something different today. You change your hairstyle. You put a different playlist on. You decide, I want to watch this on TV. You find your no voice in a small way towards someone that always expects you to say yes, whatever it may be. You do that, and you get such pushback that it makes you not bother to go any further.
Yes.
That's what we're talking about here. So when I got the man bun and got so much, criticism, stroke jokey, stroke cynical. Now what happens is this: if you ignore that and push through that, it gets more intense, and the comments get a little bit more intentionally thought through. Well, you know what? It was funny a week ago, but now you're doing it every day. it looks stupid. You're a man of a certain age, or what are people going to think? What will those people think if you're speaking in a corporate setting, and so on and so on? Like people would say about tattoos,
Yeah.
It's that. So people out there that we are speaking to today, Rebecca, I think they're listening to this thinking, great, but I did try to do whatever. I did speak up and say to my boss, I don't want to, work extra time or whatever it may be. I got into so much trouble. So I decided not to do that anymore. And we're saying to people today, don't go back, don't stop. You have to keep going, because it gets to a tipping point where, and then I'd walk around with my hair like this and look like this. And strangers in the street would say to me, you're rocking that look. You look great. Strangers, my family weren't saying it to me, but strangers were. I want to say to people, allow for the possibility that people that have known you the longest are the most threatened by you changing, and allow your encouragement to come from strangers, because the strangers have no issue. And the stranger is going to tell you what you know is true.
Absolutely. I think there's so much value to internalizing that, because a lot of people realize now, and this is another thing, when I first started this 2 years ago, everyone had me labeled as the PE teacher. I was always the sports teacher.
Okay.
So doing this was obviously different. And there's pushback for a few months, and people are thinking, they'll give you all the thought out things why you shouldn't go ahead with it, because it's not how they really see you at that point. But it's funny, you now developed the label of Paul with the tattoo in his arm and the man bun. That's your new label. My new label is now I'm the health coach. So in time, people get used to the new thing you're doing. You just simply have to remember the pushback. And it's like, even if you're on a health journey and you decide I'm going to go into breath work, I'm going to go into eating a healthier diet, blah, blah, blah. People are pushing back because they're not used to you doing that thing that actually is quite good for you, but it's threatening them in some way you don't understand yet. So a lot of the time, if you do anything different, it's just a projection onto you, nothing really to do with you. So I think that's a really good one to think about. Like when you're trying to make this journey, you're surrounded by people that love, going out at night and eating fast food or etc. And you go the opposite way. Of course, that's going to get pushback.
Yeah. And the discomfort often is they're uncomfortable because it is challenging them to step up. They won't tell you that.
Yeah.
But if you rock a new look, or you lose a couple of stone, or you start becoming more confident, or you start speaking your mind more, people around you that wish they did that too, they won't tell you, I'm inspired by you, which is what's going on. They'll tell you that they're threatened by you, or that's not right, or I don't like that. But what's really going on is they're actually inspired by you, but they are too unkind, not generous enough to tell you that, because your freedom makes them aware of their lack of freedom.
Yes, that's a really good segue onto the false self, and the version of them. A lot of them are living their false self, or you're living your false self to survive and fit in and be actually accepted. So for that woman or man, we'll say, that's listening, how can you spot that you're actually stuck living from that false self instead of what could be the real version of you? Because I would imagine the majority of people are living more of a false self than a true self.
Yes, I think you have to measure it by your internal freedoms that you have or don't have. Like I said to you about people living from intuition, I felt were having more fun than me. So if your false self, the thing is, the complexity of this is this: your egoic identity is who you think you are. Although it's a false self, it feels authentic because it's all you've known.
Yeah.
So what you have to do is you have to put yourself around energies that are not common to you, but ones you'd like to have more of.
Yeah.
So if you are not a playful person, but you love playfulness in others, get around playful humans and see how that makes you feel.
Yeah.
And if what it does to you is it lights you up, it makes you feel more carefree, less focused on your problems when you're around a playful energy, then you've got to be thinking, I can't rely on that to be brought to me from someone else. Why can't I have that?
Mm-hmm.
It begins that way. It's this awarenesses, and this is a great word. It's the awareness that when I am with you, I'm a better version of me.
Yeah.
What is it about being around Rebecca that brings out a version of me I'd like to be all the time? If you can language that, and if it would be like, well, what I love about Rebecca is that she don't give a shit what people think. And I really do care what people think, and I hate it. Mm-hmm. But Rebecca doesn't care. And I like that about Rebecca because there's a part of me that doesn't want to care either. Mm-hmm. I've cared too much all my life. So if I can language what I love about Rebecca is, you don't give a shit, and I love the freedom that gives you that I don't have. How do I get more of that? It's the beginning of a conversation that you can help me with, because you may have used to give a shit, but now you've got free in that area. How did you get free? I will be asking you. I think this returning back, and that's what it is, a returning back to your authentic self, who you were born to be, but got hijacked from being and separated from birth and before birth, as I said. The journey back to yourself begins, I think, with those inquiries, those curiosities. And that's why I've done lots of teaching around the world of prosperity of the soul, how to live from the soul, find out what lights up your soul, do more of it.
Yes.
If you like sitting by an open fire, or you like walking in the rain, or you like gardening, having your hands in soil, or you like being around animals, why? Why does that light you up? And you should be doing more of it. That's how you get back to your real self.
Well, there's just such value in that. When you talk, you mentioned flow state earlier on, and I remember when I was younger, I used to regularly get into flow state from running, from swimming, around certain people. Time went by and I wasn't tracking the time. Hours could have passed. As then you get older, I noticed, for me anyway, the flow state went down unless I intentionally was seeking it. So I really had to think, okay, what is going to bring me into the flow state today for even some level of headspace? Because that is, like you say, you're most authentically you when you're not overthinking, when you're enjoying yourself. But a lot of people, and I have clients, and the first call I have with clients, I usually ask them, what brings you joy? Crickets a lot of the time, because people actually haven't sat down, and exactly what you articulated so well, what really brings me joy, because they're thinking, oh, I should get joy from skiing, diving, running, because my friend does that and she loves that. But no, what are you as a person really going to enjoy? And flow state can be the most random things, as you know from working with people. Flow state, people always say knitting or puzzles or colouring, right? But it could be anything. Like, it really could be anything. And it's your job to kind of search for that. Like, how do you, for people that are so unbelievably disconnected from their body, how did they start on the hunt for the flow state?
You start by seeing it in others. That's for me. And it can be a movie, a TV show, a podcast, a book, a random thing you see when you people watching at an airport, or you just watch. And what happens is this: who someone's become is often a journey they've taken from who they were that was more like you. So a more evolved version of you is what you're going to see in that movie or in that book. And when you see it, it's going to be like the deep in them calling to the deep in you, saying, I realize this with people that I saw in movies or TV shows or on a platform somewhere in the world or a podcast, or I would see a preferred version of me in them. So their lives are like a postcard from the future saying, wish you were here.
Yeah.
Find those lives, find those energies, find those habits, find those places, find those situations, and start moving your life more into the neighborhood of the things that bring you alive and wake you up, which means for a lot of people, ultimately in big scale, it means you got to move from where you live, change your jobs, change your friends, change your romantic partnerships, and so on, down the line eventually. But it starts with small things.
Yeah, that's important to recognize that as well. There's people and maybe environmental things that are very hard to push past if you really want to get into that flow state and find your authentic self. It's extremely difficult to do it if there's people around you that are heavily influencing your behaviors. And I think that's a really important one to stress to people.
One of the things I think to pass this on to people, I know it's a strange way to phrase this, but one of my words of explaining this to people, individuals and corporates around the world, in transition, particularly, this is transition wisdom, is what I call dress for where you're going. What I mean by that is I was once in a coffee shop in San Diego, America, and I was in Starbucks, I think it was, just waiting for a coffee, and in walked a Klingon, which is an alien character in Star Trek movies. Klingon, a full-on Klingon outfit. Any Trekkies watching us, listening to us, will know what a Klingon is. This guy walks in on a full alien costume in Starbucks. I mean, it was just the fuss it created in the room of the elbow nudging and the jokes and the laughter and to believe this guy would come in like that. We thinking it's a stunt. It must be sponsored for something, until 3 more came in. And then we realized it was the Comic-Con event in San Diego, the Comic-Con event, which is where all the comic Marvel characters gather together round the clock through the year. These massive thousands of Comic-Con superfans, the superfans show up dressed, in the costume of their heroes. So this was a Star Trek Comic-Con event. So all the fans were coming from around the world.
Yeah.
They bring their costumes with them. Or it can be Marvel, or it can be whatever the event is. So these people were dressed for where they were going, but they weren't there yet. So if you're taking on a new habit, but people around you don't appreciate it, if you're getting a man bun and people around you don't get it, if you are finding your no voice and people around you don't like it, if you are applying for a new opportunity and people around you saying you've no chance getting a job like that, or whatever it may be, you are not around people who are your future. And when you're dressing for where you're going with the book you read, and they say to you, what the hell are you reading? What? When they see the title of the book, or the podcast you listen to, or the conference you secretly attended at the weekend, they didn't know you were going, or whatever it may be. You did what? You what? You watching what? That comment is that is so strongly felt that we go back, apologize, over-explain, or try to go secretive with it. My point to people is this. When those Star Trek aliens got to the Comic-Con event, they felt normal because everybody else is dressed like that. And if you keep going, people listen to me, if you keep going, you will find your tribe.
Yeah.
If you get out of the coffee shop, keep moving towards where others think like you, have lifestyles like you, have values and beliefs like you. If you keep moving, we will find you. You will find us, which is what you're doing, Rebecca, with what you do, helping people find their tribe. Come and join us. Let's help you. It's what I do. But if we talk to people today who are stuck like a Klingon in Starbucks, they are going to more likely get changed and go back to normal.
Yeah, fit the mold. And it's very funny as well, if you think about it, you know, in your life, even if it's a day you're traveling and you meet a person and they light you up, that changes the trajectory of the coming maybe days, weeks, months, years of your life, because they'll say something to you that instills hope or instills an idea. So being surrounded by regularly new people, but also been very guarded, I suppose, with who you spend most of your time with, because it's highly influential, no matter how much of an independent person you are.
The difference, I think, Rebecca, I've had those epiphanal moments that you're describing now, game-changing moments, but I realized I'd had many opportunities before that didn't affect me the same because I wasn't ready.
Yeah.
You know, this saying about the student's ready, teacher appears.
Yeah.
The idea of that is that actually progress and breakthrough is less to do with the teacher and more to do with your readiness.
Yeah. That's so true. It's like whenever you say to a parent, like, say you're a doctor and you say to your parents, do this and this for your health. And then 10 years later, they said, oh, the doctor said, do this and this, I'm going to do it. Yeah. They weren't ready to hear it from you. Yes. You're ready when you're ready. And I think the one thing that really makes you more ready to make change is when you're in a state of stillness and you can actually listen.
Or in a crisis or tragedy or burnt out or dark night of the soul. That'll do it too.
Yes, that will do it very effectively when you go to rock bottom. And that was, I think that was ultimately the reason I was so blinkered with this business, because there was nowhere to go. Like
Right. Yes.
So when you reach the bottom, you do push up. So hopefully without a crisis, people can still make change when you have that super clear, deeper why as well, of why you might be now living in misalignment. And it's really hard to make any change when the mood is low. So I think what you said, a really key part of you wanting to make any change is when you can increase the mood a little bit each day by having like 30 seconds of flow state. You know, It might just be that in the day that brings your mood up incrementally so that you can say, okay, I can do this thing. I can make this change. Or the people around you, you can start to make changes because your nervous system is more open to it, because your nervous system will stay in that familiar hell.
100%. And the thing about, those 30 seconds of flow state is it's a poor reward system. No one's saying, I saw that you did that today. And when there's no encouragement, which you're going to get if you find your tribe, because when I coach people like you do, or even if I'm in a Q&A session and someone asks a question like they did the other day when I was with a corporate, someone asked a question and I said to the lady, your question tells me you're going to be absolutely fine. And she said to me, what do you mean? I said, it takes a lot of self-awareness to even articulate that question. Mm-hmm. So are you aware that your question is giving you a progress marker about you more than anything I say next? And that moment to celebrate her ability to articulate the question made her feel 10 feet tall. And so when you find your tribe, that's what we do for each other, because she was my tribe in the room. But a lot of people out there today trying to be in a flow state or be more intuitive or be more spontaneous, and they did it and felt good, but it got them in a bit of trouble.
Yeah. Yes.
And if they don't find their people, the trouble's going to overwhelm the good stuff that it brings. And so that's why we do what we do, you and I. Keep our voice out there.
I think it's like when you see a child grow up in a family and there's very little judgment and it's a kind of regulated scenario, they're more likely to take the risks because the consequences don't bother them as much as it would someone that's living in fear. And I think that's like such a key part of all this is the fear element, and you addressing how much maybe the gravity of the fear in your subconscious mind that you haven't really thought about of people talking about you. And that's another thing, what you said earlier on, I laughed in my mind because like I really do not give a shit, especially in the last kind of 5 years. And I have a few role models who equally are on the same playing field. But if I didn't have them, it would have been very hard for me to put on the blinkers.
Yes.
Because I was seeing how rewarding that was for them to live a life that's very authentic and very in line with their values, because they were not letting people's opinions really bother them much at all, especially people that weren't living the life they wanted to live. Of course, they listen a little bit if somebody's living the life, and you see that, like you said, that's a really good reminder. When you read a book and you see a film and the character, you're thinking, wow, I like that life.
Yes.
That's really a reminder of where you could go. And I think the more new people you meet, the more books you read, the more podcasts you listen to, the more movies you watch, the more you'll piece by piece understand where you want to go. But if
the more you will bump into your future self in the form of those people in the movie, the TV show, the podcast, the book, the more you'll see glimpses of you in the future, inviting you to keep going. That's how it affected me over the years.
Yeah.
The movies and stuff. That's why I mentioned movies and books, because I would see a future version of me in that person saying to me, if you keep going, this is who you could be. This is the freedom you could have. This is the life you could live. So look for those, I think we're saying to people. And
you can actually cultivate a very powerful and positive social media if you're following people that you would love their life. And I think it's I follow people and I see how regulated they are, how present they are with their children. And it's highly positive for me because I'm like, that's where I'm going. Well, where I want to go anyway. Yeah. And I think that's really powerful. And social media, if you are aware and present and you're understanding the way the algorithm works, the more you watch of something toxic, the more it will bring you that toxic stuff that triggers you and you don't enjoy. The more you watch joyful things, educational things, the more the algorithm will bring that to you. You might have a day where you're low and you start to compare and you start to watch videos that make you feel bad. You're going to have to address that algorithm the next few days and clean it up. Yeah. People don't remember that very quickly. And like you say, community is extremely important. Now community has changed. It's not just the people around you. It's who you're consuming on a day-to-day basis on media. So you have to be really careful what community you're fostering, because I find this so interesting. If I look at my friend's For You page on Instagram, right, and what she's consuming, that's probably a world apart from what I'm consuming. But our minds, every day, we're thinking so much from influences from that. Your thoughts, your behaviours, your decisions are coming from that. But people aren't understanding how biased you become of what you're consuming every day. And I think that's massive now. I joined a membership, I remember, in 2001 before I started this business. And it really impacted the way I think, because people in that were doing what I wanted to do.
Yes.
Just from a simple budget every month. So that awareness is massive. We give a lot of gravity to the people around us, and yes, rightly so, but also what you're consuming daily. That's why people are, I suppose, saying I'm watching less of the news, because it does impact your mood greatly.
Yeah, and I think it took me a while to understand, and this may be a bit too deep for people at the moment who are at the beginnings of this journey, because this would have been for me listening to this podcast a few years ago. The community word. Your internal life is a community. That's the first thing that needs sorting out. We can look for external communities. That's great. But if your internal ecosystem is not ordered and aligned, then you are seeking external clarity that's met with internal confusion and dysregulation. I know you do a lot of work with regulation with people's lives, their internal life, their internal world, their vagus nerve and all that stuff, which is amazing and so important. Because I think if you're not internally self-regulated and your internal community of voices, the ego's voice, the intuition's voice, your emotional voice, the voice of your body, the voice of your trauma, if your internal community is not ordered and you don't have neighborhood watch internally, then you are listening to and following and watching good stuff while your internal life is constantly being burgled by itself.
I always think of this visually, right? You have a factory of elves in your brain and you have a factory of elves in your gut, and they're shouting up and down to each other. And
Right.
you're like, what are they saying to each other? Right, hold on a second. I need to listen to these elves because today they're going crazy shouting at me. Another day they're not really telling me that much. And I just think I'm very visual and I love to think of them up there and in my gut. What's the resounding message? And if you listen, you'll really learn a lot if you can understand what is that core theme. And I think a lot of people, depending on your mood, your state, your regulation, that core message of what the ego, the nervous system, whatever it is in the body is telling you, it can change quite dramatically depending on the input, what you're putting into it.
Yes.
Very quickly.
And it varies dramatically, for a woman in perimenopause, all of that I get. So all of that it can be a riot of what the hell's going on in the body for 10 years, as we know.
Paul has 4 daughters, by the way, so he really gets
again.
You 4 daughters, you really understand that.
No, exactly. And even now in corporates, when I'm speaking about emotional intelligence in corporates, I think they're surprised when I throw in 2 things as introductory almost, but they're vital. If we're going to talk about emotional intelligence, I need to ask you, are you neurodivergent? Are you in perimenopause? Because if we don't factor those things in, it's not a level playing field for those people.
Absolutely. That's it. Even, like you say, when you understand the fluctuation of progesterone, estrogen, and everything that changes in the luteal phase and peri and postmenopause, when you're neurodivergent, when you have ADHD, whatever it is, you'll really realize that your emotional response will be quite different on a day-to-day basis. It's really, really I'm delighted you mentioned that, because I have a lot of clients with PMDD. So 2 weeks of every 4 weeks, their mood is drastically low and very, very different. And when we look at the concept of emotional intelligence, and a lot of people, I suppose, would shy away from that because it sounds like messy work. But for a woman that is in that state of maybe dysregulation and going through change of a stage of life, what can you say about emotional intelligence and actually living in line with that?
I think emotional intelligence, it's a huge topic, as we both know. People don't know what you mean when you say the term. They didn't know intelligence word could be used with emotions, but emotions could be a form of intelligence, because we've grown up in a Western world that's majoring on academic intelligence, intellectual intelligence. So when we talk about emotional intelligence or physical body intelligence or relational intelligence or energetic intelligence, they're like, what the hell are you talking about? So emotional intelligence, I think, is hugely worthy of our attention. However we enter that space, whether it's the language that we're using now or not, what we're saying is that your emotional life is not under your control. It's controlling you, and it's giving you outcomes you don't want, and relationships you don't want, and behaviors you don't want. So it's worth a conversation. But if you could, for a start, understand that emotions are data, not directives, just work on that for a month.
And I had that mantra for a long time: feelings are not facts. And that's a really important thing, because I think a lot of people are led by a feeling, not challenging it.
Yes.
Not understanding why that feeling has such gravity because of past experiences, not because of what's actually happening in that present moment.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to be emotionally intelligent unless you're authentically yourself and you're more regulated.
Yes. And I think feelings and emotions are different to me. Feelings, I think my way of separating them out is feelings are like emotions on steroids. So when an emotion's there, Rebecca, for us, for it to become a feeling, it has to take on some meaning. Now I just feel, I'm sorry, but I just feel, I always feel this way. My parents used to feel like that too. I feel usually means there's a narrative connected to what you're feeling. So once an emotion gets across the border into your internal life and goes rogue, it now needs a meaning. Why do I feel like this all the time? Now we give it a meaning. Once it has a meaning, it becomes a narrative. And now it gets lost in your life. It just becomes who you are, when actually it's not who you are. So this language that we're talking here is the language of navigating emotional intelligence. And it's hard work. Very few are doing it. But those that are, I think, are bringing something fresh to the world. And it's really helping people understand why I've been like I am, how I can change how I am to live the life that I want emotionally, better than the one that I inherited from birth,
I think that's hugely important, to begin to challenge, even if your only action step was to think, okay, I'm feeling this emotion. and just for a moment reflect on why. What's happened in the past that, say if I said to somebody, you're stupid and ugly, but that person is really confident of their own intelligence and they feel an inner and outer beauty. That's not going to make them feel very much at all. But if that person is deeply insecure and somebody in the past has told them you're an ugly child or something, that's going to have huge meaning and huge feeling. Really understanding and piecing together and self-reflecting, and that self-awareness piece is massive. And even in the past, and a good example, I suppose, is when somebody criticizes you and you feel extreme overwhelm and disappointment and you spiral for weeks just off one comment, for example, and you ask yourself, okay, why was that? Oh, because my father would comment like that to me often, and it meant danger and it meant rejection. But then you really have a great idea of why you're feeling that intense emotion. Is it fact? Probably not what the person says, but is it giving you a massive emotional response? Yes. And I think what you said about really deeply understanding that and doing that self-reflective work, that's going to save you years of misery and care, and stopping, and I suppose really internalizing what people say to you. Because if you can understand why you're having that intense reaction, you're really going to make a lot of progress. And that kind of work, I think, is phenomenal when you can understand them hidden beliefs you have that you never really brought to the forefront. But I suppose a lot of it's going to happen, as you said. I love that documentary. It was Show Me the Boy at 7 and I'll Show You the Man. So basically, that child at around 7 is a lot of the traits the man is going to exhibit. So like you understanding that time up until you're 7, if your mother criticized your weight or if your father was violent or whatever it may be, is really going to tell you a lot about your reactions now.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. 100%. And I read a book some years ago by Najwa Zabi, and it was a book about finding home in yourself kind of thing. Some books that give you language to help you figure you out, whatever they may be, find them. And if there's something in the title of a book that has a deja vu about something you're going through, grab it or watch it or listen to it or go to the event. Even a deja vu in a book title, I realized I have to pay attention to something on that book title or that TV show, because there's a word or a line that I think is something I need to pay attention to. So your intuition will tell you to buy a book, to spend money, to go somewhere, but your ego, left brain, logic mind will be saying, no, what? No, that's not for you. That's what people don't do. So we are running past the book on the shelf in the store that got our eye, intuitively saying, get that book, follow that author, follow that person on social media. It's learning to do little things like that. And I realized that what I'd done is, for years of my life, I'd put my emotional home in other people. And of course, when you do that, you give them the power to make you homeless. So I spent years being homeless when they didn't validate me, didn't include me on a given day. I experienced some version of emotional dysregulation and homelessness because I became without an address because I had made these people my address. So if we're doing versions of that, we are subcontracting out our emotional life. So that has to be the first place we stop. We do the work of saying, I'm not putting all my eggs in the basket of your validation of me, which we do all the time in romantic relationships.
Yes. And what's interesting about that is you're seeking a feeling of someone's reaction to you, but how can you give that to yourself? So that person makes you feel love, connection, accepted, but how can you do that without them? What can you do? How can you build your self-confidence, your self-esteem, do more flow state without that person? And I think that's huge to even think of it like that, is that you can give yourself that feeling. Like, don't wait till you make the $1 million. Don't wait till you get that job. You can experience that feeling right now without that outcome, without that person, without that job, without that whatever. And I think there's a lot to be said for that, of you actually don't need a lot of things to feel the things you crave right now.
Right. That's good. Yeah.
And I think a lot of us are craving connection now. Everyone feels very disconnected. So how does that woman, and I work with, I suppose, that archetype of a woman that is spinning a lot of plates. She's overwhelmed. She feels quite stressed. She's very rarely in flow state, probably living out of alignment of her values because she's giving to everyone else. Her listening to this now might be like, Jesus, where do I even begin? Because I'm so disconnected from my body. Gut instinct isn't even on my radar.
Right.
Like, for them people that are so outside and really want to get in, how do they inch in and just feel that, okay, I can actually live in alignment, but I need to do this very incrementally and not in an overwhelming way, because they're not really have the capacity to hear the things yet.
Again, it's the self-awareness, which we haven't talked a lot about. We mentioned it, but self-awareness was the biggest game changer for me in the last 20 years in terms of a level of consciousness I wasn't in. 90% is estimated of humans have little to no self-awareness, which is a tragedy when you consider what a superpower it is.
Wow.
So to begin some version of a self-awareness journey, and self-awareness simply is the ability to be aware of your thoughts without being your thoughts.
Yes.
So
just curiosity piece, not
right.
just.
So to be aware that this isn't working for me in a microsecond, this is not working for me, is the beginning of self-awareness. Then to feed that idea, this isn't working for me. What would be a better thing to have said? What would be a better thing to have done in that moment?
Yeah.
And then do it. It's a private, personal secret. No one knows. No one's celebrating it yet. Experiment to do that. And then when you feel the outcome's better, then self-awareness served you well. And if you lean more into that experimentation in small things that no one knows are going on. That's what I started. Small little energetic choices. When I'm not going to react here. I'm going to count to 3 or 4. I'm going to do something else. I'm going to choose a different reaction. That was self-awareness to me, and me realizing I can self-regulate. If I can keep doing that, I think I'll be good here. And I didn't know I could do that. So I would say to people, start somewhere in some mini version of experimentation about making different choices to realize you do not have to do what your autopilot keep doing. You have choices, but it's work.
Yeah, and that's a very key point when you think about the autopilot scenario you're living in. And I did a lot of work with clients on emotional eating. And a really important piece of that puzzle is just the curiosity throughout the day. Oh, right, okay, I'm trying to grab something in the press now because I feel stressed and overwhelmed because I feel like this exact behavior. So they're not just saying, oh, I stress eat or I eat out of boredom. They're pinpointing the scenarios that cause that autopilot thing to happen, where they binge eat, for example, right? Yeah. And I think there's such huge power in that, because the next time they said, oh, I feel this feeling again, I feel really overwhelmed, and somebody just criticized me, and now I want to numb my emotions and avoid things with food, and I'm going to passively eat, okay?
Yes.
Having that awareness means the next time they hit that scenario, they're like, okay, I take 5 deep breaths, I'm going to make a different decision, and your whole decision path changes. And exactly like you say, this person, and you know this from everyone's life, there's one person in your life you can think of that you continuously have similar arguments with. It's the same thing over and over again, Groundhog Day. The day you decide, right, when she says that triggers me to feel this, okay, I'm going to pick a different behavior the next time that happens. 90% of the time you'll go back to default. That's the expectation. But then it'll move from 10% to 20%. You change to 30%. And I think you have to remember that. I used to get really annoyed at myself. I'd have the same reaction to somebody when they criticized me, for example. And I had that reaction loads of times, but that reaction got less and less as I became more and more aware of my reaction. And I consciously thought about it. And I think there's a lot of power in that, when you can say to yourself, right, behavior change is really messy. At the beginning, you're really going to default back to autopilot very often. But that becomes less and less over time. You're not going to be cured of emotional eating overnight, but over a series of weeks and months, with you making a different decision now and again, that's bringing you in the right direction.
Yeah, or then you realize that the person that triggers you, to move this to another level of choices that you have to make in your life, you realize the people that trigger you, actually, you can do work to be less triggered, but you realize these are actually people who you shouldn't be spending close time with either. So it's not you're all the problem. You can work on you. But ultimately, I realized some people trigger me because they're not good people for me to be around. We're not aligned. We don't have the same values. They're not doing the work like I am. We're at different levels of life. I'm aspirational in this area. They're not. And we seem to clash over those areas. So it ultimately becomes a discovery of, I can work on my triggers, but some people really are triggering me because they have a vested interest in me not changing, and rearranging then your relational life to be with people that don't trigger you, or trigger you in a way that you welcome, because the triggering is somewhere you want to grow.
Yes. And I think a lot of people don't stop for a moment and say, right, I need to make changes here.
Yes.
Because I always say that, the familiar hell. And if you think about it, a lot of people who do try to make change, it's actually so painful to the nervous system to make these changes that you will just stay in that stuck state, because it's the norm. Like it's the norm. And even though you say, I really want to change, I really want to stop passive eating, I really want to stop arguing with that person, you will keep going back to that until you consciously break that loop.
Yeah, because what's hard to say to stuck people is, do you want to be unstuck? Do you want to get well?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of safety in staying stuck. And we create a story about that justifies our stuckness. Well, it's okay for you, but, I don't have any money. Or it's okay for you, but I have issues in my health. It's all for, okay. And we justify being stuck with all kind of environmental, circumstantial stuff. And once you get that narrative around your stuckness, anybody coaching to get unstuck, you feel is unsympathetic and doesn't understand. And I spent years of my life justifying stuckness and realized that's what I'm doing eventually. I have no excuses anymore. So stuckness can be quite attractive in a strange sort of way. We form a Stockholm syndrome relationship with our stuckness, and we make friends with the bank robbers, which is where Stockholm syndrome language came from. When the bank robbery in Oslo went wrong, and the bank staff formed a friendship with the bank robbers, and they felt safer in the bank with the robbers than outside with the cops.
Yeah,
because the cops were going to start firing bullets and kill one of them. Whereas the bank robbers were taking care of the staff, sending out for food, sending out for medications, messages to their families. So the people in the bank felt safer with their hostage takers, with their hijackers, than with their liberators outside. So if you'd have said to one of those bank staff, hey, do you want to be free? They'd have said, hell no. We don't trust you guys out there trying to get it solved politically so you look good to the public with sending in the SWAT team.
Mm-hmm. And that's the devil, like the devil, is the familiar, and it's huge courage.
What a lot of people don't know is that, so the bank robbers, when the Stockholm syndrome thing was first mentioned in the 1980s, that language got used with the Stockholm bank robbery. These guys, the three robbers, got jail sentences, but minimal jail sentences, because the bank staff wouldn't testify against them because they loved them. And the chief bank robber, Jan Erik Olsen, that led the whole bank robbery, masterminded it, got 10 years in jail. That was all. He got out in 8. And when he got out, he married one of the bank staff he kept hostage.
Stop.
Right.
Wow.
So when I tell that story publicly, people do what you just did, because like, what the hell? Until I say to people, whoa, hang on, don't be so judgmental. You are doing that in your head every day. We all are. We are marrying our internal bank robbers. We're marrying our internal hijackers. We're marrying our internal unhelpful thinking.
Yes.
Keeping us small and limited. We're marrying those voices all the time, and we're stuck, and we're justifying it because this has served me well. This thinking's kept me safe. Yeah. This thinking's helped. It's that. And then when somebody comes along to liberate us, we're like, no. You don't understand.
I think of it like, when you have the same thought patterns and they're negative, and you cling on to the old story of like, he wronged me or she wronged me and this is the way I am. I think of a crocodile, and you keep feeding him big juicy pieces of meat, right? He's getting stronger, he's getting bigger. You want to try starve the crocodile. So you don't want to be repeating the tales of woe from the past very often, because that's shaping your future.
Yes.
So I think that's a really good story to tell, because you can see, we love the familiar as humans. We love the predictable. We love the familiar. We love of course, what everyone says, like the daughter usually marries someone that has a lot of behavior traits like her father, even if her father was the devil. So I think it's so interesting when you really understand that. And again, we're going back to self-awareness. Yes. When you're super aware of your tendencies, where the gravity pulls you, you begin to be able to make changes more in line with your values. Right. And I think that's massive. If anyone is listening and could take that away today, could understand, well, if I just journaling's a huge tool of mine for that self-awareness piece. If you really find that time to reflect or that time to journal, you're going to learn a huge amount about yourself, which is going to stop you self-sabotaging in the long run.
And to find voices that say to you, yes, good, do that, do more of that. Because often no one around them, like the Klingon in Starbucks, no one around them saying to you, you look great like that. I get it. Enjoy. Have a great day.
Yeah.
No one's saying that. In the early stages of new behavior and habits, that's why people go to the gym or the weight loss class, because you find like-minded people. And so when it comes to personal development and reinvention of yourself, you've got to find people that are going to say to you, what you did there, right there, that was brilliant. Oh, really? That was brilliant. Can we do more of that, please? No one's saying that to these people at times when they really need those voices, so that's what we do. That's
a very good point. And imagine you are on that weight loss journey or self-development journey, and there's 3 people around you that are saying, oh my God, I'm delighted you're doing this. I'm going to drop you over a healthy meal. I'm going to give you this drink. I'm going to,
give you a lift to the gym, or the other side of it is you have the person saying, don't bother doing that. You're wasting your time. You'll be straight back to square one.
Right, exactly.
The difference of your behaviors is huge.
Yeah. Huge,
and that's the same with the inner critic. You can have your inner critic applaud you and hype you and push you on, or you can have them pull you back. And most people, their inner critic is pulling them back.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that work on the inner critic of you like taming the ego, giving the ego some routine and placating it and telling it it's okay, and then being able to make change. So like that, marrying that regulation piece and understanding the inner critic, there's a lot of power to that combination. And that's, I'm really interested in that at the moment, of really understanding your inner critic, and everyone's is so different. What's going on, that narrative in your mind that's become normal to you that you have a blind spot to?
Yeah, and you have to put the inner critic out of business by deconstructing what the inner critic's platform is. Its platform is your trauma. Its platform is your attachment style.
Yeah.
Its platform is your family of origins behavior that you inherited, your belief systems that I mentioned earlier, you don't know you have. These layers are where the inner critic finds its voice from. So you can't just do la 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 to the inner critic. It doesn't work. You can't shout over it. You have to disempower it gradually by removing from it its power. And so to realize my trauma and to be into that space and settle it and put it away, to be aware of my autopilot belief systems and begin to identify them, language them, and begin to behave the opposite to what they intuitively have told me to do, which has been faulty all my life. Do this, do that, you'll be said, or the ego rather. What's my ego saying here? To know that these are the component parts of the inner critic's identity. Because a lot of people are just trying to, positive think themselves over the inner chatter, and it doesn't work. It's exhausting.
Absolutely exhausting. That kind of, I suppose people for a while were, really thinking I can toxic positivity my way out of everything.
Yeah.
You have to acknowledge what's actually happening internally. You can't, like you say, you can't put noise cancelling headphones on to the inner critic. It doesn't work.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, there's a lot of deconstruction to do. Paul, you have so much wisdom. I'm just kind of taken aback by everything we've spoken about on this. And I'd say people are going to have to listen to this twice, because there's a few things here that if you actually start to action them, just like them reflections throughout the day and a bit more of self-awareness, you'd make powerful change. Sure. And I actually love to ask you, where can everyone find you? Because your work, I've been following you for years. I've done so much mindset work, and I've found you such a powerful piece of that. So I'd love you to tell people how they can work with you, find you, website, Instagram, whatever.
Instagram is Paul Scanlon UK. You can find me there, guys. PaulScanlon.com is my website, so that'll be plenty for people to find out what I'm up to. Thank you, Rebecca, for reminding me to mention that.
And also, just on a last question, I'm nosy, and I ask this to a lot of people. On a day-to-day basis, what does your day look like? Because I think when you can see the habitual day of someone, it tells a lot about why they're in such a great position as you are in, with you living in alignment with your values.
Well, the answer to that changes depending, as we said earlier, on the stage of life you're at. Like, do you have twins that keep you up all night, like we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
Are you in perimenopause? Are you in work? Do you have meaning in your life? Do you have love? Are you happy where you live? Are you in health? How's your mental? All that stuff determines the answer to that question today, I suppose. My answer today is my daily routine is under my control. I'm self-determining. I do kind of what I want to do, because I've worked all my life to get to the space where I have the morning routine that I want. I move at the pace that I want. I do more of the things that light me up than I've ever done in my life. Wow. And I add some of that to my everyday. I added ice bathing to my life about 2 years ago. And I do that on a daily basis now almost. I have one inside the house, one outside the house. That's just another layer I added. I'll be adding more things as I go forward, as we encourage people to do, that become part of your, not a thing you did randomly on a wild weekend away. Someone dared you with the ice challenge, a bucket over your head. But things that you find that you add to your life that feel you're getting your life back, that you're in control of your life, and that your nervous system is calm because you are not living at the beck and call of everyone else. And I know some people listening to us now are, and I have been too, but to move your life to a place where you feel you have more self-determination and more control over your life will give you better days, whatever they begin to look like for you.
That's a very good reminder that when you know by you, the moment you open your mouth, you're living in alignment with your values, you're doing what you want, you have that kind of peaceful presence about you. And to reminder to people, that isn't actually as far away as you think once you start to regulate a little bit more and just have little micro pockets of your day where you're just in flow state, or not overthinking, or not running your to-do list through your mind constantly. You're much closer, I think, than you think. But Paul, thank you so much. I enjoyed that conversation an enormous amount, and I'm looking forward to listening back to it.
I suppose just one more thing before we go to say, I think one of the reasons I love my days now so much is that I love me a lot more than I ever did. I like me. I like this version that I have become, Rebecca. And therefore, if I like me, and I get up on a morning and like me, and I'm not trying to escape me or block me or distract me or run away from me, which I've done in my life. If you love yourself and you like your own company, that's going to automatically give you a better day and a better life, guys. And that's tech work for always saying as well. Thank you for having me.
That's an amazing way to end. And I think on that, the only home you really always have is like in your body and your mind.
100%.
And the self-compassion piece is something we didn't even tip into, but vital.
Part two.
Definitely another. Listen to this twice. I recommend. Thanks so much, Paul.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here. Cheers. Take care.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you got a lot from that. I definitely did. There's a big difference between understanding this, getting the gist of it, and actually making real change. So if you need support, daily guidance, come and join me in the Rebalance membership, where women in perimenopause are addressing their beliefs that are keeping them stuck, getting their sleep back, losing fat long term. The link is in the show notes, and I will see you in the next episode.